Hello, I'm Femi OK, and this is the Stream's online pre-show. Today we're speaking to third culture kids, or TCKs. I will explain that a little bit more coming up during the show. And we're examining the question of where you are from and where's home. So, joining us on set is Rebecca Grappo. She is an international education consultant and a TCK mother. And we also have some TCKs in the hangout here to share their experiences. From Boston, Steph Yu is the founder of Denizen Magazine. That's an online community for TCKs. From Florida, Sazine Kohler. She's a writer and has grown up in more than a dozen countries. From London, we have Maeva Peak, a student and a TCK of mixed heritage. And from Singapore, Kirtan Menon. He's a TCK who is now completing national service in Singapore. Great to have everybody on board. Let me just tell you what the pre-show does. It gives us a little flavour of what you're going to bring to the conversation. So, Rebecca, just very briefly, what is your expertise that you're going to share with everybody?
Well, I'm not a TCK, although I've lived abroad in 11 different countries, but my work has always been with people who are TCKs. So I've taught in American international schools, and I've lived in all these countries. I've raised my own children this way, and I now, as an educational consultant, work with TCKs on a daily basis. So I have a lot of insight.
Fantastic. Steph Yu. Hello, Steph.
Hi.
Hey, what do we need to know about you as we go into this conversation? Give me a one-line strap line.
Sure. I'm Cantonese. I was born in Hong Kong, lived in Taiwan for a bit, and then lived in Singapore for 12 years of my life. But even though I've never lived in the United States until college, I feel very, very American because I went to American International School. And I also founded denizenmag.com, which is an online magazine for third culture kids. And we're celebrating our 5th anniversary this year.
Well, happy anniversary. Kiernan Menon in Singapore. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
You look fabulous.
Thank you.
What do we
so
need?
do you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure you've got a visual, so I'll take that as a compliment.
No, I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. So, Kirtan,
yeah.
What's special about you, huh? What do we need to know?
Nothing much actually, but I was actually born in Singapore. I spent my first few years in Malaysia. My dad's a diplomat, so that's why. And after that, I came back to Singapore for 4 years. And following that, I went to Geneva in Switzerland for 3 years. And then following that, I went to New York for 7 years. And then after that, I just came back to Singapore to serve in the military. So that's sort of been my life. And I guess that's what makes me a TCK.
You need to get out more, Kirtan. You're always hanging around the house. You need to travel more. Maeva Peak, hello. What's special that you're going to bring to this conversation?
Well, I guess I don't really have a nationality per se, apart from my legal one. My mom's Nicaraguan and my dad's Dutch. I was born in France, but I didn't stay there very long. And I've lived in a number of countries my whole life, including Haiti and Jamaica and Nicaragua and New York and Malaysia and Thailand. A couple places.
Oh my goodness, if you listed all of the places, we'd be out of time before the end of the main show. Sazine Kohler and Boca Raton. Not the most exotic of places, but you've been around a bit, haven't you?
I have indeed. Yeah, I actually sat down yesterday and calculated all the countries and cities I'd lived in.
Right.
And so I've lived in 13 countries and 18 different cities.
Oh my goodness.
It's insane, yeah.
It is insane. You're going to share the insanity with us in about a minute's time. We're about to start the main show, but not before we check in with Malika Bilal. I want everybody to hear your voice and tell them what you'll be doing, Malika.
I'll be wrangling all of the feedback from online, from Twitter and Facebook and Google+, and people are weighing in. And of course they are, because our community, a lot of them can identify with this.
You know what some people who are watching the pre-show are doing? They're probably searching TCK and third culture kid, because we haven't told you what it means yet. And I just found out that I am one. You can find out exactly what a TCK is in less than 30 seconds time. See you in the main show. Thanks everybody, you are fantastic. We're going to do it all again in the main show. Don't go anywhere. Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, we explore the experiences of people who have lived in so many places around the world, they have their own identity, and they're known as third culture kids. Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for your live feedback. I have to admit, Malika, I didn't even know this was a thing until we started research on this program. What is our community saying?
Well, don't worry, Femi, you're not the only one. Though a lot of our community can relate to the third culture experience because a lot of them are. But what they can't relate to is the idea of nationality being central to their identity. And to put it in perspective, Susang tweets in, "I consider myself a global citizen." Now, of course, this stream is made up of global citizens, so we're calling on you to join the conversation, whether you are one, know one, or just have a comment or a question. Use the hashtag AJStream.
Joining us in the studio, we have Rebecca Garappo. Rebecca is an international education consultant. She's lived in over 10 countries and is the mother of TCKs herself. Welcome to the stream, Rebecca.
Thank you very much.
Rebecca just did something amazing to me. She just told me I was a TCK. It's a little bit like finding out I was adopted, which is great because now I can be part of the entire conversation.
You're a part of it.
What is a TCK? Let's lay it out for anybody else like me who it's a revelation for, a third culture kid or a third culture.
So, to paraphrase the most widely used definition of a third culture kid, it's a person who has spent a significant amount of time of their developmental years in a country outside of their parents' home country. They adopt elements of all the countries and the cultures in which they have lived while having full ownership in none, and tend to have the greatest sense of belonging with other people with a similar background.
Wow.
So that's you.
So explain that so that people at home can work it out. So my parents are Nigerian.
Right.
I was born in the UK.
Right.
And then I made up this made up Nigerian British culture. I made up a third culture for myself.
But it's not exactly like 1 + 2 = 3.
Okay.
So in some ways, so maybe what we need to do is even take the definition a little further. Ruth Van Reken, who co-authored the book Third Culture Kids Growing Up Among Worlds, she still does a lot of work on TCKs, and she wants us to have a conversation now about cross-cultural kids, of which TCKs would be a part of it. So not to derail the show here, but you would also be. No, I'm not going to. But you also are a child of an immigrant. You have, different nationalities in the mix, and you have moved internationally as well. So we'll let you be part of the club.
Thank you so much. Wow. You will hear more from Rebecca and TCKs coming up in just a moment. But remember, this is your show, and we love hearing your program ideas. So if there is a story that you think we should be covering on the stream, get in touch with us. All you have to do is go to our About page. That's at stream.aljazeera.com/about, which is where I am right now. There you will find our Twitter handles. Here's mine, here's Malika, and the producers. Tweet us your idea, and you can inspire a future episode. So where are you from? It's a simple question, you'd think. Well, take a look at some of these answers.
That's an awkward question.
Well, I was born in Australia.
I was born in the US. I was born in Switzerland.
I was born in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
I was raised in Syria.
Both of my parents are immigrants.
To Palestinian parents.
I'm Iraqi.
My parents are originally from Eritrea.
I'm half Saudi, half Puerto Rican.
Then I moved to Thailand.
Then Lebanon.
In Saudi Arabia, Good Iraq.
Grew up mainly in New York City.
Then Canada.
Then I moved to Dubai.
And here I am.
And I'm an Indian citizen, even though I've never actually lived there. I hate this question.
I have a headache. Oh my goodness, you just saw some of our members from the stream team, and that was some of their responses to a very simple question, which is, where are you from, where's home? And it's a very complicated answer, especially for third culture kids or TCKs. And have a look at this. You can see that TCKs often find themselves caught in the middle of so many cultures, one that may not even be their own. So what are some of the issues of identity that these cultural chameleons struggle with? To give us some more insight into the lives of third culture kids, I'm joined by 4 of them. From Boston, we have Steph Yu. She spent most of her childhood in Singapore, but doesn't feel Singaporean. She's also the founder of Denizen Magazine. That's an online community for people who grew up in multiple countries, international school alumni or TCKs. From Florida, Sazin Kola. She's a writer and has lived in more than 10 countries. Zambia, Thailand, India and France, just to name a couple of them. And from London, we have Maeva Peak. She's a student in TCK of mixed heritage. And from Singapore, Kirtan Menon. He is also a third culture kid and is currently finishing up his national service in Singapore. It's great to have all you TCKers in the stream. Let me start with Steph. Steph, when you meet another TCK, can you tell their behavioural signs that you know you've met your kin?
That's a really great question. Every time I meet another third culture kid, I feel like I have an instant connection with them and I can talk to them about immediately. And I think part of the reason why is third culture kids are so adaptable. You know, they've been dropped into so many different places, and so they kind of, you know, like a chameleon, fit into any situation. And they also grow up a lot faster than the average kid. They've been moved around so much that I feel like they have such global and diverse experiences.
So Hazen, if you had to point to what are your best qualities because of your background and you've travelled so much, what would you say?
Oh my goodness, that's tough. I think a few years ago I would have agreed with Steph in that it's adaptability. But you know, when I turned 28, just a few months after that, I all of a sudden realized that the adapting was taking a really heavy emotional toll on me, and that it became harder and harder for me to relate to people who actually aren't third culture kids. And what it made me realize was that, in fact, when I thought I was adapting to people, it was actually me bridging a gulf between my experience and someone else's experience who maybe hadn't traveled or didn't have a cross-cultural background or anything like that.
Can you give us an example? Can you give us an example of having to bridge the gap?
Oh, of
Take
course.
us into a little scenario.
For example, like right now where I live in a very small town in Florida, and people here don't have a passport, they haven't traveled anywhere, you know, they haven't even left the state. And so, you know, several years ago, I think I would have found a way to connect with them in spite of really not having anything at all in common. But now it takes so much energy for me to be able to figure out where are the points where we intersect, and can we learn anything from each other? Can you even hear what I'm saying? Can you even understand my experience? And what I've been noticing is that they really can't, because they don't have a concept of any world outside of here. And that has been so difficult for me to deal with. And thank God for social media, because that's how I've stayed sane here, pretty much. And you know, it's, yeah.
We're going to talk about some of the difficulties that you mentioned a little bit later on in the show, but I want to pick up on something that you said about bridging a gap. Rebecca, Sizine mentioned those words, and our community is echoing that. Zafar says, in a sense, it allows me to integrate myself more with others. It makes me adaptable and more accepting of change. And another one, I'm a proud TCK. It means I'm free from the bias of my parents' culture to look at the world objectively. But on the other hand, on Google+, Victor writes in, tongue-in-cheek, this is a fancy way to talk about immigrants' kids, or maybe only rich immigrants' kids. Are we talking about an elite few?
There are a lot of things there to address. So first of all, no, we're not talking about only elite kids. Those who've lived overseas haven't always been living the cushy expat life. There are lots of different reasons why people are moved outside of their home culture. Sometimes I think a lot of the adjustment has to do with the circumstances of the move or living outside the United States as well. I think in terms of adaptability and being able to fit in, it is important to try to find something else that people have in common with the people in the community that haven't necessarily had the same experiences that we've had. But I know exactly what Celine is talking about, that it's very hard for adults as well as young adults, as well as teenagers, as well as younger kids, to have this very, very important part of themselves and to have so few people with whom they can share it. Because so many people feel like if they're going to start talking about their experiences, it's seen as showing off, or that people are going to think of them as being elitist, when it's really just the story they have to tell.
Let me just bring Keaton into this conversation. He's in Singapore. Good morning, Keaton.
Good morning. How are you?
I want you to tell our audience how you got to Singapore. Give us the abbreviated version, because it's pretty spectacular.
Well, how I got to Singapore, I'm actually Singaporean, so I mean, it's sort of, I'm coming back to Singapore to serve my military right now. So I was overseas all this time, and that's because of my dad, because he's a diplomat, and I came back about a year and a half ago to serve my mandatory military service, and that's 2 years. So I'll be finishing in December.
Okay,
yeah, so
you missed out all the stops in between, because that's what I want our audience to know about, because I'm going to ask you how you cope with that. Go on.
All right, well, I mean, I started in Singapore, and then I moved to Malaysia when I was very young, and those were, like, you know, the very early years of my life, so I couldn't really remember that. But after Malaysia, I came back to Singapore. I had my kindergarten 1 and kindergarten 2 here, followed by primary 1 and primary 2, and after that I went to Geneva. and that was where that was my first experience really overseas, because Malaysia is an ASEAN country. It's part of Asia and stuff. So going to Switzerland was really a big move for me, and that's where it sort of changed for me, and I could sort of see the difference in. I had a more of a world view when I went to Geneva, so and after that New York, and yeah, New York is just was the best experience that I ever had as a TCK.
So Keaton, when your dad said Keaton family were moving, and you were old enough to realize what that meant, what was that feeling like inside?
Well, initially, I mean, the first thing I thought of as any kid was, oh, my friends, I'm going to be missing my friends and stuff. But eventually, once you move, I sort of felt that the more frequently that one moves as a TCK, the easier it is for them to adapt, in a sense, because the first time is always very hard, and the second time you're like, okay, you know what, I've done this before. And then the third time it's like, yeah, this is a piece of cake, and that's what it was kind of like when I moved to New York. So. And coming back to Singapore, it's like it felt like I was returning to a land that I hadn't been in for a long time, yet it was still home. So when I came back, I sort of my Singaporean side came out in me very, very quickly.
Let me just go over to London and Maeva. Maeva, there seems to be a dark side of having so much exposure to travel and different continents and different places around the world. Can you illuminate on that for us a little bit?
I think it's actually related to what Cezine was saying about relatability and trying to bridge a gap versus actually relating to someone. I mean, I think basically that's it. It's that eventually it's not so much that you're a pastiche of all the places that you've lived, so much as you learn how to be a chameleon, and then that is in itself exhausting, and you don't actually have anyone in the end that I guess that you really relate to beyond a human level, I guess. I mean, that's, you still get on with people because of their personalities, not because of where they come from.
So what about things like dating then? If friendship is hard, what about dating? Silence. She went there. I know you have stuff to share. Go on, share it.
Well, I mean, in terms of relatability or the prospect of you not really staying in one place at any point in time.
Well, there's a practical consideration. Do you even bother to get a boyfriend or another half or a partner if you know you're going to be moving quite soon? So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly go for it anyway, because I don't think you can really control for that. But I think there is sort of a difference in your perception of what is workable or feasible in terms of long-distance relationships. Whether that actually communicates with the other person is a different story.
Femi, it's actually interesting then that you mentioned that. I want to pick up on this because there's a member of our community who left a video comment on TCKs and dating. Cezine, have a listen to this. I want your thoughts on it.
Another aspect of being a third culture kid is feeling like you're dating someone from a different culture, even if you're in a relationship with someone from your own passport country. TCKs are invisible immigrants and often struggle in their friendships and in their relationships with their extended family. Most people don't realize how much of your upbringing is impacted by your environment and how that continues to impact your behavior as an adult.
Cezine, she says it's like being an invisible immigrant. Is that how you feel?
It is actually, but actually I don't actually feel so invisible because I look different and I get the question, where are you from, even when I'm here in my passport country of the United States, because yeah, I don't look like I'm from here, which I don't really understand what that means, but yeah, no, but I agree with everything that she said. And my husband is also an American, so we both have American passports. But my goodness, the first few years of our marriage were really tough because I realized that we actually didn't have much in common at all. The way he was raised in one city his whole life and only began traveling as an adult. And I had lived in so many places and had already made up, like 100th culture with all the places that I'd lived in. And it was tough finding the points to relate with each other. And eventually, I think it was about 3 years in, we finally reached like a meeting point, and now things are great. But it was difficult. It was like dating someone from a different planet, and being married to someone from a different planet.
On Denizen Magazine, the magazine that I started for third culture kids, we actually get letters from people who are dating TCKs, and I think they stumble upon our site because they're looking for advice on how to best date a TCK. If they, I actually just got an email like 2 days ago from a TCK, someone who was dating a TCK, and he was basically asking, I don't really understand my girlfriend, I need some help, can your magazine help us out? So we're actually working on an article right now where we are emailing people who are dating TCKs for advice on what it's like to date a TCK, because you're right, can be difficult.
What do you tell them? Like, get a passport and start traveling, then you can be on my level?
Well, we're still researching the article right now, so I'm waiting to hear back responses. But I think that, traveling to the places that TCK grew up can be really, really important. So my boyfriend and I have been together for 4 years. Aww. And he's traveled to Singapore with me at least on 3 occasions, and also to Hong Kong, which is another place that I lived. And I think it made a huge difference in the way that he kind of understands who I am and where I grew up. But there's all sorts of difficulties, like, the fact that my home is a 12-hour or 20-hour flight away, and his home was only a 3-hour flight away.
Yeah, I hear lots of murmurs of understanding there. Rebecca, this is your territory. This is exactly what people come to you for help with, because you help children of families that have to move around the world.
Right.
So listening to all of this, what do you want to add?
There are a couple of points that I was thinking of. Number one is that I think that the kids who do really, really well in this lifestyle are the people who are able to quickly make other social connections. That they have a strong sense of identity, they're recognized for something that makes them special, they connect easily, they form important relationships. So for those who can do that well, this is a great lifestyle and they adapt very quickly. But some people exhaust their emotional resources and they don't have the energy to do it one more time. There are other people who have a really hard time making new relationships and connections. So it's a difficult lifestyle if that's their characteristic. And then there are some people that just really wash out. They just can't do it one more time. And so then they have some problems maybe with their attachment style and being able to form lasting, meaningful relationships.
Well, there's a bit of me that's thinking, why would these parents drag their kids around the world and put them through all of this?
Oh, did you hear everybody?
Mum? TCK mum?
Oh, man.
Why would you do that, TCK mum?
Well, I have heard my children say that.
And then what did you do? Darling, we're going to Paris.
Yeah. Well, actually, this is something that we're still talking about, even though they're in their 20s, and we're still talking about the impact that this had on our family. I think the kids that I work with professionally, as well as in my own family, even if they've struggled with it, can see that there was something really good that came out of the experiences. However, I think that if I could do it all over again, I probably would have been more empathetic and listened more as we were going through these moves, instead of always being the cheerleader saying, oh, come on, it's going to be great. Because it's not always great, and it's not always their idea. So how can we give kids a sense of control over things that aren't necessarily of their doing, that they get moved around the world?
Did you hear the groaning from all of our TCKers when you said that? Malika?
I think some of our online community are also groaning. Marilyn said, I loved my upbringing and went on to raise TCKs. The struggle came in repatriating to my passport country with 5 TCKs in a row. Kirtan, quickly, what are your thoughts on that? Do you blame your parents or do you love your upbringing?
No. I mean, I'm very, very happy, with the upbringing that I've had, and I really feel that that there are a lot of advantages to being a TCK. Like to name a few, I mean, you get to meet a lot of people, you get to network with a lot of people from different countries and stuff. You get to learn languages. That's one thing that I don't think people who say live in one country are really exposed to. I mean, you do have your second languages and your third languages you can take, as a part of your school, but it's not the same as being, assimilated in like a society, and also the culture, like sort of being diffused in a different culture altogether, learning from them, teaching them your culture, and I think most importantly, it just makes you more adaptable in general. Right. Yeah, and I think that's like the key point,
Okay, Steph.
Yeah.
If you have a family and you get to travel all over the world, would you make them TCK kids?
I would absolutely love to. We actually did an article on denizenmag.com recently, actually not that recently, about TCKs raising TCKs. You know, we're getting to the point where there are TCKs who are old enough to have children who then subsequently raise TCKs. And they do that because they think that the upbringing is just so rich.
Interesting. What a great place. Yeah. Susan, do you agree? Would you go for it all over again?
Absolutely not. No. I think my exact words to my husband were, I would never inflict my childhood on anybody, especially a child, especially a baby. You know, no way. And I think, I don't know, I think for me, I hit that point of exhaustion,
right,
of cultural, of assimilation exhaustion, of adaptation exhaustion, and I can't do it anymore. I'm
right.
so tired.
I hear that. I hear that in your voice.
I'm just exhausted from it, and I don't know, it's really tough, and so I can't imagine bringing a child and having to then deal with my own exhaustion with it, and then all the stuff that they're going to have to deal with. So so I wrote
Susan,
it.
did you have TCK siblings that you were growing up with, or were you an only child?
No, I had two siblings. The difficult part of it was that, well, we're also mixed race. So my mom is American and my dad is from Sri Lanka.
Okay, Zayzin, that's going to be our cliffhanger, okay? Dot. More to come from Zayzin and our TCKers in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. This is a conversation that's going to get even more personal if that's possible. But right now, here's Malika with some of the other stories we're following.
It's not easy to explain tax avoidance, but a new protest against Apple makes overseas tax woes easier than ever to follow. Introducing iDodge. British comedians organized a flash mob to protest Apple's tax havens in Ireland by declaring this store Irish territory. The country's friendly laws have brought in foreign firms, but the U.S. Senate says they also helped Apple avoid at least $74 billion in taxes. Though the flash mob was all in good fun, the point wasn't missed online. Lucy tweets, "Hope Apple will listen and start paying tax in the UK like I do." Next, how can women combat sexual harassment in the Beijing subway? Police suggest they shelter their bodies with a newspaper or a bag. According to China Daily, it's part of new guidelines to fight harassment, but it's led to ridicule online, with sites like Shanghai's posting satirical pictures like this. Film tweets, "Blame the victim 2013. Others defended the police. On Reddit, one user wrote, "Beijing police are just trying to protect their citizens." And our last lead's out of Singapore, where some bloggers are going offline Thursday for a 24-hour internet blackout. Their message? Free my internet. They're protesting government regulations on certain news sites that now must pay $39,000 as insurance against undermining racial or religious harmony. The government argues it's to ensure consistency, not censorship, and defenders say blogs won't be affected. But bloggers say the law is too broad. And some will take their protests off the web to demonstrate on June 8th. Are you planning to join the protests? Let us know. Use hashtag AJStream. Femi?
I have a feeling that our TCKers might have something to say about the newspaper and the bag against sexual harassment in the Beijing subway. Maybe a taser might be more effective. So, on tomorrow's programme, what should we expect? We will discuss the hookup culture on college campuses. Is it empowering or maybe devaluing the sexual choices of young women? And can you believe there are apps for that? Of course there are. Stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com, and we will be talking about third culture kids. We will see you online. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. We're talking about third culture kids and issues of identity. Let's get right back to the discussion. Steph became the host of the show and threw out a question to Cezanne, and at that point we had to move to the end of the show. So Steph, recap your question, Cezanne, then you can pick up on your answer.
Yeah, the question I was asking Cezanne is whether she had siblings, because we've written articles about TCK siblings where, nobody else has the experience that you have, whether, you were born in Botswana, lived in London, lived in Switzerland, then in Singapore. Nobody else has that experience except for you and your siblings. So TCK siblings tend to be really close units, which is why I was asking Cezanne, do you have a TCK siblings that you can share the experience with?
It's and I was mentioning that we're a mixed race family. So my mom is American and my dad is from Sri Lanka. And what ended up happening is me and my sisters, we actually look very, very, very different. And I think that the way that we ended up looking really affected how we were perceived in the different places that we lived. For example, my youngest sister is very, very fair-skinned. She looks European. People don't even think that she's mixed at all. And then my middle sister, she actually looks like she's, half African, half white. She's got this amazing curly hair. And then there's me. People always think that maybe I'm from India, or I get all kinds of things. And so we were never even necessarily associated as siblings, which was always weird growing up. And then, of course, being associated with our parents was odd as well, because, there would be people, I'd be like, where's my mom? And they'd be like, oh, your mom didn't come through here because my mom is white. And so, so there was a lot of stuff, like intercultural stuff going on in my family that I think growing up made it really difficult for us to relate to each other. And if we had read the Third Culture Kid book, the Van Reken book, I think that we would have had a completely different experience. I think we would have all been able to look at each other in a different way and be able to kind of, again, bridge all those gaps that we had. But we didn't know at the time. Nobody knew about this stuff. So so to answer your question, I did have siblings, but unfortunately it didn't really work out that I had a very close-knit relationship with them for a number of reasons. So so now I'm 34. Yeah.
Are you making yourself younger?
I tried to.
Sneaky.
And now I just feel very lonely, and so it's great to talk to other TCKs, but there's still this sense of loneliness.
Cezanne, don't make me cry. That's terrible. I'm going to put on my laptop. All comforting each other. I'm going to put on my laptop the definition of what a TCK is. If you just joined us or joined us a little bit later, here's the definition while I've talked to Rebecca. Rebecca, you said something that a guest should never say to me, which is don't mention that. So I'm going to mention it. I asked you about, did you have a pet when you were traveling around the world? And you said, don't mention the pet. What's up with the pet thing?
What's up with the pet thing? My children really wanted a dog, and all the time my husband and I said, no, we're not going to get a dog because it's complicated enough moving a household and 3 children around the world. And if we had a dog, that would just make things more complicated. In retrospect, maybe it wasn't the right decision to make, and if my children are watching, so my son actually had rescued a Great Dane when he was in college, and the response that I got was, I always wanted a dog and you never let me have a dog. So, and of course we all adore this dog, and I look at it now as it probably would have been a really good thing if we'd had a pet along.
Oh, okay, TCK team, any dog stories or pet stories out there? Could you have pets? Anyone have a pet?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah?
And it's quite funny though, because my dog is actually sort of a third culture dog. I mean, she's a French dog, and she moved to Switzerland because we got her in France, and she moved to New York, and now she's in Singapore, so yeah.
And how many languages does your dog speak?
Just French and English.
Okay, so you speak to your dog in French. You tell your dog.
No, English.
Oh, in English.
But she grew up with French, So.
All right. Before we sink any lower in the conversation, Malika is going to raise the bar.
Our community seems to want to transition back to reverse culture shock. And Kirtan, I want your thoughts on this because you're someone who moved back to your parents' home country. Faze on Twitter says, what happens is you go back to your native country, quote unquote, and you get teased for not being familiar with the language and the culture. And there's a video comment from a former TCK. Have a listen.
One of the things I found that us third culture kids have in common is that the worst culture shock that we experience is not going to a foreign culture, it's coming back home to our parents or our home culture, where you're supposed to think you understand what all the cultural things of that home is, but that can be just as foreign, and even if not more foreign, than going somewhere new.
So Kirsten, there were a lot of air quotes in that video comment, and definitely tells us something about what the definition of home and country and all of that means, but what are your thoughts?
No, I definitely agree with that to a certain extent. But in my case, I mean, my upbringing was very Singaporean. So, well, I shouldn't say Singaporean. It was very Asian. So, regardless of when I came back to Singapore, I still felt Singaporean to a certain extent. So I didn't feel like I'd ever be like teased or I didn't feel like I'd be out of place or anything. And to the point about being at home, I also feel that you sort of tend to, like being a TCK, you sort of tend to feel at home in more than one place. So like when I go to New York, for example, I don't tell my friends, oh, I'm going to New York this winter. I tell them, oh, I'll be coming back, So yeah, that sort of answers this question.
Well, Maiva, I want your thoughts on that because you have Dutch citizenship, but you don't actually speak Dutch. So does that make things difficult?
Certainly. I mean, I guess for also whenever I come back to Nicaragua, it's kind of the same. I do speak Spanish, but I don't exactly look like I'm from there. And I don't really look like I'm from Holland either. So it's the same. I mean, I don't really know enough about either countries to consider them home countries. So.
And is it hard to have set economic rights and things of that sort in those countries because you have citizenship but maybe haven't really lived there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, trying to get a loan, which is something that everyone, I guess, at some point for their education considers, oh, well, simple enough. It's like the difficulty is it's compounded if you have sort of lived everywhere, don't exactly have the proper registration papers and social security numbers and proof of residence for more than a number of years. It's seriously, it's kind of difficult,
right?
To say the least.
Do you know one of the things I picked up from our conversation today, Team TCK, as I'm going to call you, is that despite some of the challenges, you've all got an incredible sense of humour. I don't know if you've ever seen the Tumblr site, when you're a third culture kid.tumblr.com. It has got some really funny jokes in it. This is my favourite one. It's when you surprise a foreign worker by talking to them in their native tongue. Do you have kind of little funny anecdotes that we can just end up with that just makes it like, it's tough, but they're just these little moments that make you smile?
I do, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just here in London, I think one of my shoes had just it had fallen apart. So I went into this little shop and I saw this guy from Malaysia there. And I don't look Malaysian at all, and I lived there for about a year. And I picked up enough of the language that when I left, I said, terima kasih. And he looked at me like, I'm sorry.
And what does that mean? Does that mean thank you very much?
It just means thank you very much.
Oh, okay. I'm going to get you all to wrap up in a language other than your own. So just say thank you in a language other than you would think would be, like one of the languages you know. So, Maiva, just say goodbye. Any language you want.
Oh, just goodbye?
Yeah, you can say it in English if you want, but that would be boring. So, yeah, say goodbye.
Okay. Sawadee ka.
Nice. Say Zine, say goodbye.
Okay, this is Lakota. Tokshake.
Beautiful. Steph, say goodbye.
This is Mandarin. 再见.
Lovely. And Keaton, say goodbye.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. And Rebecca, she's like, really? You're going to ask me? You've lived in 10 countries. Pick a language to say goodbye in.
Portuguese, até logo.
Lovely. I love this. Malika?
I'm gonna stick with goodbye.
Okay. How does the community react to this conversation? Do they like it?
Well, one thing, they definitely do like it. They are still weighing in with their stories. But one good one here is, yep, 100%, it's super cliched, but home really is where the heart is. I think that wraps it up.
Oh, I'm filling up. I don't have any tissues on the desk right now. Thank you, everybody. What a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, especially as I just found out I'm a TCK. Well, I'm a TCK adult. So what are we doing on tomorrow's show? The hookup culture in college. I think we can invite the TCKs back for that as well. Now, could it be empowering for women or devaluing their sexual choices? That's a discussion for another day. Can't wait for that. In the meantime, you know where to find us. We'll be online. Thanks for watching.